Chosen one, you keep wondering why they pulled away, why the people who once clung to your light suddenly turned cold, why those you loved so deeply began to treat you like a stranger. But what if I told you they didn't walk away because of something you did wrong? They walked away because of what was right inside of you. The Spirit of God within you confronted the darkness in them, and though you were quiet, your presence shouted truth, louder than any voice ever could. This isn't rejection, this is revelation. Chosen one, hear me with your spirit, not just your ears, because the pain you've carried in your heart is not because you were unworthy of love. It's because you carried a presence too heavy for counterfeit connection. You've been trying to fix yourself for being too much, when in truth, you were never meant to fit where God never planted you. You didn't lose them. They lost access to something sacred. There's a holiness in you that doesn't even have to speak to shake the atmosphere. Your very existence interrupts comfort zones. Your purity convicts pride. Your gentleness disrupts manipulation. Your boundaries expose selfishness. Your wisdom pierces through lies like a sword. And when people aren't ready to confront what's broken inside themselves, they will blame the mirror that reflects it. And, chosen one, you've been that mirror, unintentionally revealing what others tried so hard to hide. That's why they pulled away, not because of your flaws, but because of your clarity. You didn't lose them. God removed them, because your destiny cannot afford distraction. You can't walk with the Spirit and entertain what only feeds your flesh. You can't ascend while trying to hold onto hands that are tied to their own darkness. And some of those hands you loved deeply. You prayed for them, cried for them, showed mercy when they gave you none. But God saw what you couldn't. He saw the jealousy behind their smiles. He saw the hidden resentment when your light began to rise. He saw the silent curses they whispered while pretending to bless you. So he pulled them back, not to punish you, but to protect you. And you, chosen one, must stop chasing after people who left you as soon as they could no longer use your light to guide their own shadows. You've been weeping over closed doors that God Himself shut, trying to reopen what heaven has already sealed. But today, the Spirit is calling you into clarity, into release, into freedom, because you were not called to be loved by everyone. You were called to be used by God. And sometimes, His calling comes with isolation. You know that season you've been in, the one that feels like exile. That silence isn't punishment, it's preparation. God's been training your discernment, sharpening your spirit, healing your identity. So when He raises you up, you won't be confused about who belongs beside you. Your loneliness wasn't random. It was sacred separation. God didn't want just anyone to have access to you. Not when you're carrying oil meant for nations. Not when your presence is shifting spiritual climates. Not when your prayers are opening portals and closing demonic assignments. That kind of calling requires consecration. Chosen one, I know the nights were long. I know the silence hurt. I know you begged for just one person to understand. But even in that emptiness, God was there, closer than the breath in your lungs, whispering, I'm enough. You weren't abandoned. You were hidden, covered, guarded, because what's inside of you is too holy to be mishandled. God saw how you loved purely, how you forgave easily, how you gave second chances even after they shattered your first. And He said, no more. No more soul ties with snakes. No more delayed obedience from emotional attachments. No more shrinking yourself to keep the peace in places that feed off your pain. So, he let them leave, because the fire on your life is too hot for lukewarm company. And when they pulled away, your spirit cried, but your purpose smiled, because heaven knew the less you carry, the faster you rise. And baby, you were never meant to crawl among the crowds. You were born to soar with the few. Eagles don't flock. They fly alone, but they fly high. You may have felt forgotten, but in the spirit, you were being formed. While they talked about you, God was talking to you. While they withdrew, he drew near. While they misunderstood you, heaven was marking you. You were being carved, purified, pressed, like oil from the olive, wine from the grape. That pressure wasn't meant to crush you. It was meant to release what's inside of you. You carry presence, you carry fire, you carry revelation, and the enemy tried to make you believe that your tears were weakness. But your tears were washing away what couldn't go with you. Every betrayal was a pruning. Every goodbye was a graduation. Every rejection was redirection. Because God never wastes pain. He never allows suffering without strategy. And this, chosen one, was all part of the plan. Can you feel it in your spirit now? That weight that tried to bury you was actually breaking the shell of the old you. You've been mourning the loss of people who were only assigned to one season of your life, but you were trying to make them permanent. In a story, God only wrote them in as a chapter, and that's why it hurt. You were holding onto bookmarks. When God was turning pages, you thought it was the end, but he was writing a whole new volume. You weren't too much. You were just too real, too raw, too anointed, too surrendered. You didn't conform. You didn't play games. You didn't dance with the devil and call it ministry. And that's why they couldn't stay. That's why they left without explanation. Because when purity walks in, pretense walks out. And when the Spirit starts to rise in someone, everything carnal in others starts to recoil. You didn't change. You awakened. You evolved. And not everyone could come with you. But you're still here, still breathing, still chosen, chosen one. I need you to sit with this. They didn't leave because you failed them. They left because you reflected something they weren't ready to face. You didn't just walk into their life. You disturbed their silence. You disrupted the comfort they had in wearing masks. And even without speaking, your spirit revealed the truth they tried to suppress. Your light made their shadows undeniable. Your peace made their chaos uncomfortable. Your devotion made their compromise evident. And some people would rather lose you than lose the lies they built their lives on. You thought they'd celebrate your growth, but it terrified them. You thought they'd support your healing, but it exposed their wounds. You thought your love would hold them, but your presence held them accountable. So, instead of drawing nearer, they distanced themselves, not because you were unworthy, but because you were too spiritually pure to blend into their confusion. The light on you convicted the darkness in them, and chosen one, conviction feels like judgment to those who refuse to change. So don't you dare dim your light to make others stay. Don't you water yourself down to be easier to swallow. You're not bitter for speaking the truth. You're not arrogant for having discernment. You're not too much for refusing to settle. What you are is set apart, and set apart things don't belong everywhere. Set-apart people don't fit just anywhere. God didn't call you to be popular. He called you to be powerful. And sometimes, power looks like being misunderstood. You've been aching over the silence, the distance, the sudden shifts. But hear me in the Spirit. Their absence is a gift. God let them walk so they wouldn't block what He's doing in you. He knew their presence would dilute your power. He knew their influence would drain your oil. He knew their presence would blur your vision. So He let the ones you clung to become the ones you had to release. Not because He's cruel, but because He's wise. And you, chosen one, are not who you used to be. You've been transformed in the secret place. You've been forged in fire. You've been purified through pressure. You've been trained in solitude. And now, there's a new sound coming from your spirit, one that cannot be silenced. You're not just speaking now, you're declaring. You're not just living now, you're shifting atmospheres. You're not just walking anymore, you're carrying glory. And not everyone can handle that. The same people who once leaned on you now feel uneasy around you. Why? Because you're no longer available to enable. You no longer entertain dysfunction. You no longer accept less than what you carry. You've tasted heaven now, and nothing less will satisfy. Your appetite has changed. Your discernment has sharpened. You can no longer sit in rooms that reek of ego and call it fellowship. You can't pretend not to see what the Spirit has revealed. You've been marked, branded by fire, sealed by purpose. And yes, it feels lonely sometimes. Yes, your heart breaks for those you once loved. Yes, your soul longs for connection. But even in that ache, there is alignment. God is not punishing you. He's purifying you. He's guarding the mantle He placed on your life. He's shielding the oil that flows from your surrender. Because if the wrong hands touch it, it will cost them everything and damage you in the process. So He removes, He separates, He isolates, not to break you down, but to build you unshakable. You're being fortified for the next level. And chosen one, the next level, requires a version of you that no longer needs validation to feel valuable. A version of you that no longer seeks approval from those who can't even approve of themselves. A version of you that walks in rooms quietly and shifts the atmosphere just by showing up. That's who you're becoming. That's who you are. But let me tell you something else. The ones who walked away will feel it, not from revenge, not from arrogance, but from undeniable evidence of who you are in God. Your fruit will speak, your glow will testify, your peace will shout, and every lie they told to justify leaving you will fall flat under the weight of God's favor on your life. Because when God elevates, He also exposes, not to embarrass them, but to vindicate you. You were never crazy for feeling what you felt. You were spiritually sensitive in a world that thrives on numbing. You were seeing prophetically in environments that only moved by sight. You were hearing heaven in rooms tuned to hell. That's why you were so exhausted. That's why you felt the warfare, even when nothing looked wrong, because your spirit was picking up what your eyes couldn't yet see. You weren't dramatic. You were discerning. Chosen one, there is a reward for your obedience, for your integrity, for your tears, for your silence in the face of slander. God saw it all, the private breakdowns, the lonely prayers, the times you chose love when hatred would have been easier. And He's not unjust to forget. He's storing it, weighing it, multiplying it, and when the time is right, not a moment too soon, He will release a blessing so visible, so undeniable, that even those who left you will have no choice but to say, that had to be God. But until then, keep moving in silence. Keep walking in purity. Keep loving without conditions. Keep showing up with light in places full of shadow. You don't need to prove anything. Just be who God called you to be. The anointing speaks for itself. Chosen one, let me tell you something sacred. When your spirit is consecrated, it will irritate those who live in compromise. You weren't trying to be better than them. You weren't trying to expose them. But when you carry light, it will always uncover what hides in darkness. And when someone isn't ready to heal, to grow, to repent, they will reject the very presence that could have set them free. That's why you were rejected. Not because you were wrong, but because you were right in a way they didn't know how to handle. You've been asking God, why does my presence shift the energy in the room? It's because your presence is not just yours, it's heaven's. You've become a carrier of the atmosphere of the Holy Spirit. When you enter a room, you don't just bring conversation, you bring conviction. You don't just bring comfort, you bring correction. And some people don't want truth. They want company in their confusion. But you weren't built for that. You were never meant to be just another agreeable voice in a room full of noise. You were created to be a sound, a distinct, piercing, holy sound that awakens dry bones. That's why they whispered behind your back. That's why they twisted your kindness into manipulation. That's why they painted your silence as arrogance. Because if they admitted the truth, that you were anointed, that you were real, that you were chosen, they'd have to confront everything in themselves that wasn't. And chosen one, not everyone is ready for that level of honesty. So they left. And God let them. Because if He didn't, you would have kept pouring your oil into cracked vessels. You would have continued sacrificing your peace to keep fake loyalty. You would have stayed attached to people who were feeding off your fire, while secretly hoping you'd burn out. God saw the weight of their presence. He saw the way your spirit shrank just to keep the peace. He saw how your energy dimmed after every interaction, and in His mercy, not His anger, He removed them. And now you're here, in this place of sacred stillness. No crowds, no applause, no clapping hands to distract your ears from hearing His whisper. You've been stripped of the noise, so heaven could reintroduce you to your own voice. And maybe it feels like exile. Maybe you ache for the warmth of community. But this is where mantles are made. This is where prophets are formed. This is where warriors are trained. Alone, unseen, misunderstood, but not abandoned. The desert is not your death. It's your deepening. Because in this place, God is showing you that your value was never tied to their presence. That you don't need their affirmation to know who you are. That you don't need a crowd to be confirmed. You only need a calling. And yours, chosen one, is heavy. It requires preparation, not popularity. Submission, not spectacle. Integrity, not influence. You've cried enough tears over people who couldn't see your worth. You've spent enough nights wondering what you could have done differently. But the truth is, no matter how much love you gave, it would have never been enough for someone who wasn't ready to receive it. And that's not your fault. That's not your burden to carry anymore. Release it. Lay it down. Forgive them. Not for their sake, but for your freedom. Because every ounce of energy you waste holding on to what left is energy you're stealing from your future. Chosen one, the Spirit is calling you to rise, to stand tall in who you are, to stop apologizing for your discernment, to stop diluting your vision just so you can blend into blind spaces. You don't owe anyone your silence anymore. You don't have to downplay your fire. If they couldn't handle the pilot flame, they were never meant to walk with you through the full blaze. You were always going to be too much for those who've settled for too little. And that's okay. Let them go. Because ahead of you is a life saturated in the supernaturals, a life where your obedience unlocks generational blessings, a life where your prayers don't just move your atmosphere, they break chains for others. You were called for impact, not acceptance. And impact comes with a cost. The cost of being misunderstood, the cost of standing alone, the cost of walking with God when everyone else is walking away. But the reward? Oh, chosen one, the reward is glory. The reward is oil. The reward is intimacy with the one who never left your side, even when they did. The reward is watching the ones who dismissed you witness what God does with the rejected, because He always uses the overlooked. He always anoints the outcast. He always raises up the ones who were last in line, mocked, dismissed, counted out. That's who He chooses, and He chose you. Let that settle in your spirit tonight. You didn't miss out. You were redirected. You weren't forgotten. You were hidden. You weren't betrayed. You were broken open. And from that breaking, the fragrance of your destiny is now being poured out. Don't curse the pain. It birthed purpose. Don't regret the silence. It birthed strength. Don't resent the loss. It made room for glory. They pulled away because they could feel heaven on you, and they weren't ready to face it. Chosen one, I want you to pause and breathe in this truth. You were never meant to carry the weight of being understood by everyone. Some people will never see the fullness of who you are, not because you're hidden, but because their eyes aren't trained for glory. Their hearts aren't calibrated to discern anointing. They see the surface, but they miss the oil. They see the posture, but not the warfare behind it. They see the smile, but they can't comprehend the battles that forged it. And so they walk away, unaware they just left something heaven had touched. You've been replaying memories, trying to find the moment it all shifted, wondering if maybe you should have said less. Maybe you should have loved differently. Maybe if you hadn't been so honest, so passionate, so available, they wouldn't have walked. But chosen one, can I tell you something raw and holy? It was never about you needing to change. It was about you being unchangeable in a world that demands you compromise. Your consistency convicts the inconsistent. Your purity disturbs the impure. Your stillness challenges those who thrive on chaos. And they don't even know why they feel discomfort when they're around you. They just know that when you show up, something inside them feels exposed. And instead of facing it, they flee. They disconnect. They label you. They mock what they don't understand. But you're not called to be understood. You're called to be surrendered. And surrender doesn't make sense to a flesh-led world. When you chose to obey God over popularity, you became a threat. When you chose silence over retaliation, heaven took notice. When you chose to love without expecting return, you disarmed darkness. These weren't small decisions. These were acts of spiritual warfare. And though the world didn't see the battle, heaven did. And God said, "That one is mine." That's you, chosen one. The one He kept when others discarded you. The one He healed when others wounded you. the one he elevated quietly while others were shouting for attention. You weren't seeking the spotlight. You were seeking the secret place. And that's why his light is about to shine on you in ways you never imagined. But before elevation comes separation. That's the pattern. That's the process. Before the harvest, the pruning. Before the crown, the crushing. Before the glory, the isolation. And now that you've walked through it, now that you've stood in the fire and refused to bow to bitterness, now that you've worshipped with tears on your face and questions in your chest, now that you've stayed faithful when it would have been easier to walk away, now you're ready, not just for blessing, but for burdened blessing, the kind of favor that costs something, the kind of anointing that requires stewardship, the kind of visibility that demands discipline. And the ones who left, they couldn't have handled the version of you God was forming. They weren't equipped to walk with the weight you now carry. And that's not rejection, that's mercy. Let that sink in. God didn't remove them to hurt you. He removed them to make space for what fits the next season. The version of you that's rising doesn't entertain confusion, doesn't beg for crumbs, doesn't try to resurrect what God buried. The version of you that's emerging walks with clarity, talks with conviction, and moves with holy boldness. You're no longer explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You're no longer watering down your calling to make it digestible for carnal minds. You're no longer sacrificing your peace to keep temporary people present because something sacred happened when they left. You were cracked wide open, yes, but what spilled out wasn't emptiness. It was glory, oil, fire, intercession, revelation. You didn't lose yourself. You discovered the real you. The you that doesn't fear solitude anymore. The you that knows how to sit with God and be still. The you that no longer chases people, but chases presence. The you that understands that being set apart is a compliment, not a curse. And now you're dangerous, not because of ego, but because of intimacy. The devil trembles when someone like you rises. Someone who's been through the fire and still praises. Someone who's been betrayed and still believes. Someone who's been rejected and still chooses love. That kind of spirit, that kind of vessel, it can change the atmosphere of an entire generation. So don't look back. Don't mourn what God removed. Don't revisit grave sites. He told you to walk past. Don't keep rereading chapters He's already closed. The ache may linger, yes. The memories may still sting. But healing doesn't always mean forgetting. Sometimes it means finally understanding the why. And chosen one, the why is this. They pulled away because your spirit convicted them. Because you were never theirs to keep. Because God was protecting the oil you carry. And now you rise. Chosen one, the rising has already begun. You may not feel it, because it doesn't always look like celebration. Sometimes it looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like having to rebuild from nothing. Sometimes it looks like walking away from what was familiar, with trembling hands and a broken heart. But make no mistake, your rising isn't waiting on applause. It's anchored in obedience, and your obedience, even in the quiet, has shaken the very gates of hell. Do you remember the moments you didn't want to pray, but you did anyway? The nights when your soul was too heavy to speak, but your tears cried out to heaven? The days when you chose to bless those who cursed you, to give when you had nothing, to believe when all you saw was darkness. Every one of those moments was building something eternal inside you. They were layering your spirit with endurance. They were clothing you in humility. They were preparing you to carry the very thing others walked away from, the weight of God's glory. Because while they saw weakness, God saw worth. While they saw someone to leave behind, God saw someone to lift up. While they couldn't discern your value, heaven was marking you with favor. You are not defined by who left. You are defined by who stayed. And God, the Alpha and Omega, He stayed. In every heartbreak, in every silence, in every betrayal, in every moment you wondered if you'd survive the ache, He was closer than your breath, closer than the sting, closer than the memory. He didn't just walk with you, He carried you. And now He's calling you to carry Him. You've been chosen for more than just survival. You've been chosen for stewardship, for spiritual authority, for the release of breakthrough wherever your feet land. When you speak now, it won't be from the wound. It will be from the well, a well of wisdom dug deep through trials, a well of compassion that only the rejected can understand, a well of revelation that flows from being stripped of everything and still choosing God. And you'll know who's from Him and who isn't, because this time, your discernment won't ignore the red flags in the name of love. This time, your spirit won't bond with what feels familiar. It will wait for what feels holy. This time, your kindness won't be manipulated because it's been refined. This time, your boundaries will be fortified, your peace protected, your oil guarded. They can't come back the same way they left. Not because you're bitter, but because you're healed. You're not angry anymore. You're aware. You're not vengeful. You're wise. And wisdom doesn't keep what wounded it. Wisdom doesn't water what God has uprooted. Wisdom doesn't try to resurrect what God allowed to die. You can love them. You can bless them. But you don't have to bring them back into sacred spaces they mishandled. Chosen one, you are a gate now, a living threshold between heaven and earth. The same spirit that made them pull away is the spirit that will draw the hungry, the humble, the broken, who are ready to heal. You'll be a resting place for the weary, a voice for the voiceless, a light for those who've been lost in darkness, and you'll carry it with humility, because you'll remember the pain. You'll remember the pit. You'll remember what it felt like to be overlooked. You'll remember the ache of loving deeply and losing quickly, and that remembrance will keep you soft. It'll keep you surrendered. It'll keep you holy. Because now you understand, you were never meant to fit in. You were never meant to be ordinary. You were never meant to be palatable. You were meant to be pure, and purity will always be offensive to those still wrestling with shadows. Your spirit will always stir something in people. Some will be drawn, others will flee. Don't take it personal. Take it prophetic, because God is still writing, still refining, still redeeming every moment you felt left behind. He's not just giving you double for your trouble. He's giving you depth for your trouble. Depth of revelation, depth of identity, depth of peace, depth of joy. You're not going back to who you were before the breaking. You're stepping into someone stronger, bolder, quieter, but more powerful. You don't have to chase anymore. Not love, not validation, not opportunities. When God sees the time is right, it will find you. Divine alignment doesn't require force. It only requires trust. And trust is exactly what you've been developing in the fire. So let it burn away the last of what you thought you needed. Let it refine the final layers of who you once were. And let God finish what He started, because the same Spirit that made you feel so alone is now the same Spirit bringing you into the season of becoming. And they'll watch, not out of bitterness, but because when something divine begins to bloom, even the ones who left will have to pause and witness it. Chosen one, I know you've been feeling it lately, that holy stirring in your spirit, that sense that something is shifting even when your surroundings still look the same. It's like your heart knows what your eyes haven't yet seen. That's not imagination. That's not emotionalism. That's spiritual sensitivity. It's the evidence that the very thing you've been waiting for is closer than it's ever been. And you wouldn't feel that pull so strongly if heaven wasn't preparing to release something you've been anointed to carry all along. But before God reveals it through you, He must first affirm it within you. That's why you've been walking through seasons where nothing seemed to work. Not because God was punishing you, but because He was purifying your why. He needed to break off every motive rooted in people-pleasing, every lingering desire to be validated by those who never saw you clearly. He needed to sanctify your assignment so it wouldn't get tangled in needing applause, so you could stand in the center of His will and not be moved by the silence around you or the noise. Chosen one, you are no longer who you were when they left. That version of you, the one who second-guessed every word, who shrank to keep others comfortable, who overgave to be seen, that version died in the wilderness. What came out on the other side wasn't just healed. It was holy. You've been stripped down to the foundation, so God could rebuild you without mixture. No more cracks of compromise. No more patches of performance. Only fire-baptized stone, laid by the master builder himself. And now there's a sound in your spirit that hell recognizes. You don't even have to speak, and the atmosphere shifts. You walk into a place, and demons start to tremble. Not because you're loud, not because you're flashy, but because you carry something consecrated. You carry the fruit of what it means to suffer in silence, but still sing. You carry the fragrance of someone who chose surrender over survival, and that scent, that unmistakable aroma of crushed oil, it can't be faked. It can't be fabricated. It only comes from the pressing. So when people say, "You've changed," smile and say, "Yes, I died to become this." Because they don't know the nights you cried and still said, "Nevertheless, Lord." They don't know the warfare that clung to your name when all you wanted was peace. They don't know how many times you forgave without apology, blessed without recognition, and chose light when shadow would have been easier. But God knows, and heaven has kept record, and the same God who watched you sow in tears is preparing to let you reap in joy. And no, not everyone can come with you. That still stings, doesn't it? That even after all this growth, all this clarity, there's still a part of your heart that aches for who walked away. You still replay the what-ifs, still feel the echo of conversations that ended too soon, still dream of reconciliation. But chosen one, I need you to hear this clearly. Sometimes closure is not a conversation. It's a confirmation that peace doesn't always require understanding, that healing isn't dependent on an apology, that you can love deeply and still let go completely. Because not every soul you encounter is your assignment, and not every connection is meant for covenant. You don't owe your presence to people who mishandled it. You don't owe your healing to those who contributed to your wounding. You are not responsible for explaining your growth to those who refused to grow beside you. And though your heart may want to go back and fix what broke, your spirit knows forward is the only direction grace is flowing now. And God, the one who knit your spirit before the foundations of the earth, He's already gone ahead of you, preparing divine replacements for every removal, placing kingdom voices where there were once distorted echoes, aligning hearts that see you, not just for your gift, but for your soul. The loneliness you feel now is not a punishment. It's a pause, a sacred space where He removes the residue of the last season and pours fresh oil into your cup. Because where He's sending you next, you can't afford to be half full. You'll need overflow of wisdom, overflow of peace, overflow of identity so secure that rejection no longer touches your roots. That's the soil God is tilling in you right now. He's not just giving you visibility, He's giving you depth. Because what you carry can't just be seen, it must be felt. You're not called to impress. You're called to impact. And impact requires weight. So, yes, they pulled away. But look at what was born in the void they left behind. Look at how much stronger you are now. Look at how much quieter your soul has become. Look at how much clearer your discernment is. Look at the boundaries you never knew you were allowed to have. You're no longer surviving. You're becoming. And it's only just begun. Chosen one, I need you to see the fullness of what God is doing. You were never walking through loss. You were walking through divine layers being peeled back. Layers of identity that didn't belong to you. Layers of expectations placed on you by people who only loved the version of you that made them feel comfortable. You were shedding illusions, shaking off false assignments, coming out of cocoons built by others' opinions, and the break-in, that was your becoming. They didn't just walk away from you. They walked away from their own opportunity to witness the glory God was forming in secret. Because when heaven begins to mold someone for purpose, it rarely looks impressive at first. It looks messy, painful, lonely. It looks like people misunderstanding your silence. It looks like invitations drying up, doors closing, voices fading. But in that stillness, God was chiseling your soul. He was removing your dependence on the crowd, so you'd lean fully on His voice. He was stripping away every place your worth had been misplaced. Every friendship, every role, every space where you were being tolerated instead of treasured. Chosen one, do you realize what a miracle it is that you didn't break under what tried to destroy you? You've walked through spiritual warfare that would have crushed others. You've endured emotional storms that no one even knows about. You've stood in rooms where your presence was resented, and still you smiled, still you served, still you loved. Not because you weren't hurting, but because you refused to let the pain change your posture toward God. That kind of resilience is not natural, it's supernatural. It's the mark of someone anointed, someone handpicked by God, not just to survive, but to stand when everything else collapses. And now, the very places that once made you question your worth will be the soil where your roots go deep. You'll begin to feel it soon. A new boldness, a holy confidence, not arrogance, not ego, but an unshakable awareness of who you are and whose you are. The doubts will still whisper, yes, but they'll no longer drive you. The wounds will still ache some days, but they won't define you. You're crossing over, from tolerated to trusted, from cast aside to commissioned, from questioned to qualified, because heaven does not promote based on popularity. It promotes based on purity. And you, chosen one, have been purified through the fire. Not a single tear you cried was wasted. Not a single seed you sowed in silence has been forgotten. And not a single rejection you endured was without divine intention. They were all stepping stones, all alignment, all a setup for where God is taking you. You keep looking around, wondering why things still feel barren. Why, even after all this healing, all this obedience, you still don't see the full picture. But listen to this truth. God doesn't paint his masterpieces in the presence of the unworthy. There are some moments so sacred, he reserves them for those who have remained hidden in him. That's what this has been. A hidden season, a hallowed preparation. And when he reveals you, it won't be to impress them. It'll be to glorify him. They'll say, "How did you come through that with joy?" You'll say, "Because joy wasn't a feeling, it was my foundation." They'll ask, "How did you not lose your mind?" You'll say, "Because my mind was anchored in truth." They'll wonder, "How did you still rise after being dropped so many times?" You'll whisper, "Because the fall wasn't the end. It was the formation." Chosen one, you are not a victim of abandonment. You are a vessel of glory, and vessels are not displayed until they are fully formed. That's why you had to be hidden. That's why you had to be set apart. That's why even in rooms full of people, you still felt like the odd one out, because what's in you is not common. And that's exactly why they left. They didn't know what to do with someone so uncommon, so unmoved by flattery, so rooted in conviction, so discerning, that lies couldn't stand too close. But let them go. Let the confusion fall away. Let the ache soften in the presence of truth. You are not losing anything that was ordained to stay. You are not walking away from belonging. You're walking into it, belonging to the one who saw you fully, loved you completely, and chose you eternally. Let that truth settle over your spirit like rain on dry ground. You don't have to explain anymore. You don't have to beg for clarity. You don't have to prove your heart. God has already spoken, and when he speaks over someone, nothing and no one can unanoint them. You are his. You are rising, and this time, no one can stop it. Chosen one, you've come through fire and flood, through rejection and refining, and now heaven is about to entrust you with something weightier than favor. It's responsibility. Responsibility for the rooms you'll enter, the lives you'll touch, the chains your very voice will break. And you're ready, not because you feel ready, but because you've been made ready through everything you didn't understand. You've wrestled with silence, cried out in confusion, been tempted to turn back to comfort, but still you pressed in. Still you stayed faithful when your feelings screamed otherwise. Still you laid your heart on the altar even after people walked out and storms rolled in. And that, chosen one, is what separates you. Not perfection, not performance, but surrender, deep, trembling. I don't get it, but I'll obey. Surrender. And that is what heaven looks for. God didn't choose you because you were qualified. He chose you because you said yes, because you were willing to be pruned, because you let him cut things away that others cling to for identity. because you let him take people, places, and patterns that once made you feel safe. And now, there is an authority resting on you that didn't come from a platform. It came from pain. That's why you don't sound like everyone else. That's why you don't move like everyone else. That's why when you speak, something in the room shifts. It's not charisma. It's not intellect. It's the Spirit of the living God flowing through a vessel that has been emptied and yielded. And it cost you. It cost you popularity. It cost you closeness with those who once knew the old version of you. It cost you your comfort zone. But what you carry now is not cheap. It is sacred. It is rare. And it is recognizable to those who carry the same fire. Chosen one, let them say what they will. Let them assume what they want. You don't need to defend the grace on your life. You don't need to correct every false narrative. The fruit will speak. The oil will testify. The power in your presence will reveal what your words never had to explain. Because you are walking evidence that God still anoints the overlooked. You are proof that pain can be a pulpit. You are the embodiment of mercy-wearing skin. And for every door that was slammed in your face, God is building one that only you will have the key to open. For every time they withdrew because they couldn't handle your truth, heaven took note. And the ones who couldn't handle the sound of your broken cry won't be the ones who get to hear the sound of your victory shout. Because this next season isn't about proving anything. It's about revealing the glory that was being cultivated in the dark, revealing the call that couldn't be silenced even by the sting of betrayal, revealing the power of a life hidden in God and consecrated for His will. You won't have to network your way into it. You won't have to beg your way into rooms. Your name is being whispered in places your feet haven't touched yet, not because of ambition, but because of obedience. And obedience always makes a sound in heaven, the sound of yieldedness, the sound of sacrifice, the sound of, yes, Lord, even when it costs everything. That's what got heaven's attention, and that's what's about to get earth's. You've become a sanctuary, chosen one, a walking temple, a place where God's presence rests, not just visits. People will encounter you and feel peace without knowing why. They'll be convicted without you preaching. They'll weep without understanding what's being broken off them. Because it's not about you anymore. It's about what you carry. And when you carry holiness, it confronts everything that isn't. That's why they pulled away. That's why they avoided your gaze. That's why they accused you of being too deep, too intense, too different. Because they felt God when they were near you, and they weren't ready to feel Him. They saw light and weren't ready to leave their shadows. They heard the sound of truth and weren't prepared to let their lies die, and instead of bowing to the conviction, they backed away from the vessel. But they didn't know that you were weeping for them, that while they talked, you travailed. While they left, you interceded. While they rejected, you released. Because you're not just anointed, you're assigned. And those assignments hurt. They carry weight. You feel the pull of people who no longer speak to you, the ache for those who ghosted, the quiet compassion for those who turned cold. You still love them, but you've learned to love from a distance. You've learned that access is sacred, and not everyone gets to stay in the garden where you've bled and bloomed. The oil costs too much now. The anointing is too heavy, and you're not about to risk it for the sake of nostalgia. You don't owe anyone an explanation for the way you've evolved. You don't need permission to protect your peace. You don't have to tolerate environments that drain what God has filled. And though it hurts to walk away sometimes, staying in spaces that suffocate your spirit would hurt you even more. This is the season of holy separation, of divine distancing, of spirit-led exits. You're not moving in bitterness. You're moving in wisdom. You're not running from people. You're running toward God. And every step you take away from what once comforted your flesh is a step closer to what feeds your soul. This is not loneliness. It's alignment. This is not isolation. It's intimacy. And where you're going, you won't miss what tried to keep you stuck. Where you're going, you won't need to explain the fire in your eyes, the authority in your voice, the clarity in your silence, because the ones who meet you in the next chapter won't need context. They'll carry confirmation. They'll speak your language. They'll recognize the scent of oil. They'll walk with the same limp. There'll be answers to prayers you forgot you prayed. You'll no longer have to teach people how to honor what's holy. You'll no longer have to defend your boundaries. You'll no longer have to apologize for being too much, because in the right company, you'll be just enough. Chosen one. There's something holy that happens when you stop chasing the ones who left and start embracing the God who stayed. Something unshakable is born in your spirit when you finally realize that their absence didn't break you. It blessed you, that the silence they left behind became the sanctuary where God began to speak more clearly, that the room they vacated became the very space God filled with revelation, healing, and power. What felt like abandonment was actually divine construction, because in the wreckage of your relationships, God was laying the foundation of something eternal, something no betrayal could tear down again. You see, your growth didn't happen by accident. It was forged in the lonely hours. It was crafted through long walks with no answers. It was nurtured in those moments you kept showing up when you wanted to disappear. That is where the authority came from. That is where your discernment sharpened, not through applause, but through adversity. And because of that, no one can ever steal what God gave you in secret. They can copy the outer form, but they cannot duplicate the oil, because the oil came from the crushing. It came from you saying yes when no one was watching. It came from you weeping but worshiping, from you losing people but keeping your purity, from you being lied on and still choosing truth. That's the oil they couldn't understand. That's the weight they couldn't carry. That's the cost they never saw behind the scenes. And that's why God wouldn't let you hold on to them. He saw their heart when you only saw their words. He saw their envy while you saw potential. He saw their hidden resistance while you prayed for unity. He knew they would become a distraction to the destiny He's calling you to. And in His mercy, not His wrath, He let them pull away. Because what you're stepping into requires clarity. It requires spiritual security. It requires walking without second-guessing every prophetic instruction God whispers. And God doesn't share His secrets in spaces of chaos. He doesn't release new mantles in the midst of confusion. So He removed what confused you. He silenced what distorted your discernment. He dried up wells that once sustained you, so you would return to Him for living water. And now, you're beginning to see it, aren't you? The way your peace has multiplied, the way your prayers have deepened, the way your steps feel lighter, even without the support system you once leaned on. You're walking more slowly now, not out of fear, but out of reverence. You're speaking less, not because you have nothing to say, but because you know the weight of your words. You're choosing solitude, not because you're broken, but because you've discovered how sacred your space really is. You no longer crave validation from those who couldn't handle your process. You've realized that being chosen means being cut away from the crowd, that to carry uncommon favor, you must walk an uncommon path. That's why you're here. Not to be seen, but to see. Not to impress, but to intercede. Not to arrive, but to abide. You've become a dwelling place, a secret place, a carrier of His presence in a world that's starving for truth. And your presence, just being who you are, has become warfare. Your obedience has become intercession. Your purity has become prophetic. Your boundaries have become an altar where false spirits are exposed. And people can feel it. They don't know how to explain it. But when you walk into a space, something shifts. Conversations die down. Laughter fades. Masks fall. Because when you carry God like you do, the room knows. And yes, it's heavy. Yes, it's costly. But the same Spirit that has called you is the one who sustains you. You're not carrying this alone. You never were. Even when you thought you were losing your mind, heaven was holding yours together. Even when you felt empty, God was filling you in ways you couldn't see. Even when they left, the angels didn't. Even when your confidence cracked, your calling stayed intact. So, walk forward, chosen one, not in bitterness, but in boldness. Don't look back at the ones who withdrew. Don't reread their last words, trying to find healing in old pain. Don't water the dead garden of yesterday when God has planted a whole new field ahead of you. You've mourned long enough. You've questioned long enough. You've been in the valley long enough. And now, heaven is calling your name, not just as a whisper, but as a summons. You are being summoned into purpose, into power, into placement. This is not about revenge. This is not about proving them wrong. This is not about shining so brightly they regret leaving. No, this is about shining because God is in you, because His glory refuses to remain hidden, because the world needs what your process has produced. This is about healing others with the same comfort that once held you together when you were falling apart. It's about showing up as evidence that God really does restore what was broken, that He really does breathe life into dry bones, that He really does use the rejected to release revival. You are revival, chosen one. You are restoration in motion. You are what happens when someone doesn't quit. You are what it looks like when grace writes the final word. And you didn't come this far just to shrink now. You didn't bleed through seasons of silence just to be silent when the door opens, when the light shines, when the voice of God says, "Go." You were born for this moment, formed for it, refined for it, and you carry within you the evidence of divine process, evidence that rejection was always a form of redirection, that their absence was always going to be the space where God would dwell instead. So let your heart heal. Let your hands open. Let your spirit rise. The chapter that begins now is one where God writes with bold ink. And this time, no one's walking away, because those who are meant to run with you will be sent, not sought, appointed, not attached. They will come not to drain you, but to build with you, to intercede with you, to carry the vision alongside you. And they'll know, without you having to say a word, this one has been with God. Chosen one, do you realize how rare you are? In a world obsessed with noise, you chose stillness. In a culture that rewards image, you embraced authenticity. When others clung to what glittered, you reached for what was holy. You are not just a believer, you are a carrier of weight that cannot be bought, cannot be mimicked, cannot be earned through performance. It came through pressing. It came through pain. It came through 1,000 private sacrifices that no one will ever see. But God saw. And now, the very thing that made you weep is the very thing that makes you undeniable. You walk with a glory that doesn't need announcement. It introduces itself. People see you and don't understand why their spirit trembles, why conviction rushes in like a wave, why their own masks suddenly feel heavy. It's because you're no longer just speaking words. You are releasing presence, the presence of the one who stood with you when all others left, the presence of the God who whispered your name when no one else remembered it. That presence now marks you, and those who tried to control you, to shrink you, to manipulate you, they couldn't grasp it. So they ran, so they pulled back, so they left. But their departure was never your downfall. It was your delivery into something sacred. You are no longer in the place where you try to convince people to stay. That version of you is gone. You've buried it. You've wept over it. You've released it into the soil of obedience. And now, something new has risen. You don't chase. You don't beg. You don't shrink. You simply stand, rooted, holy, whole, because your identity is no longer attached to who receives you. It's found only in the one who sent you. And when you know who sent you, you stop negotiating your calling with those who never heard God speak your name. There is a courage rising in you now, and it's not loud, it's deep, it's not flashy, it's firm. It doesn't scream to be noticed, it simply is. It stands in the face of false accusations and smiles. It walks into rooms where your name was slandered and carries peace. It sits at the table, prepared by God while your enemies look on, and still chooses grace. That kind of courage only comes from crushing, only comes from abandonment that turned into appointment, only comes from being rejected so deeply that all that remained was God's voice, and realizing that was enough. Chosen one, your calling is not to impress. Your calling is to release healing in your silence, to release hope in your walk, to release glory when you worship. You don't have to be on a stage. You don't have to have a title. You don't need their platform. You carry a throne within you. And when you speak, even the atmosphere bows. You are heaven's answer in a world full of confusion. You are clarity in the middle of chaos. And yes, it's cost you, but look what you've gained. Look at the discernment that now flows like breath. Look at the compassion that coats every word. Look at the boundaries you now guard like a gatekeeper of your own soul. You will never again apologize for protecting your peace. Never again dilute your discernment. Never again try to resurrect what God buried. Because now you know, your spirit isn't just sensitive, it's strategic. God made you feel what others ignore, so you could pray when others gossip. He made you discern what others excuse, so you could stand in the gap when others step back. You carry weight not everyone is meant to understand, and that's okay. Let them misunderstand. Let them assume. Let them whisper. Because in the end, the fruit will speak. The favor will speak. The fire on your life will speak, and not even their silence can drown it out. This is your confirmation. You didn't imagine it. The shift was real, the withdrawal was prophetic, and the ache you've carried was proof that something holy was being born. That deep place in you that feels stretched, that's the making of oil, that pull to isolate again, to pray again, to weep without knowing why. That's the Spirit brooding over something new. You're not being emptied, you're being positioned, you're not being abandoned, you're being anointed, and what's coming will not resemble what you lost. It will be pure, it will be sent, it will see you, but more importantly, it will honor what you carry, because this time they won't pull away. This time they'll be drawn by the fire, not to consume you, but to be changed by it. Chosen one, can you feel it? That shift in the atmosphere around you isn't your imagination, that stirring in your soul, that quickening in your spirit, that deep longing that words can't explain. It's all pointing to one thing: divine transition. You are standing at the edge of something sacred. You've cried your way here. You've been refined into this moment. This is the place where your old identity cannot cross over. This is where the wilderness ends and the commissioning begins. And no, you're not perfect. You're not polished. You still carry some bruises, but so did David when he stepped into kingship. So did Joseph when Pharaoh called his name. So did Esther when she walked into the throne room. And so do you, chosen one. This moment was always coming. He was just waiting until your heart could carry the weight of it. You see, they thought they broke you when they walked away. They thought you'd lose your fire, that you'd question your value, that you'd chase them for closure. But what they didn't know was that God used their exit as an entry point into deeper dimensions of your calling. They left, and it hurt, but their absence made space for clarity. Their silence made room for His voice. Their rejection opened the gate to restoration. And now, you're not just healing. You're rising with purpose in your steps and thunder in your prayers. You're walking like someone who's been with God. You're speaking like someone who's wrestled with angels. You're moving like someone who knows how much it costs to carry glory and who refuses to carry anything less. This season, Chosen One, is not about chasing platforms. It's about becoming the altar, the place where heaven touches earth, the place where people encounter God, not because you perform, but because you're pure. You are the sermon. You are the answer to someone's secret prayer. You are the evidence that yes, God still restores, still chooses the broken, still redeems the rejected. And you didn't learn this through theory. You lived it. Every scar is a verse. Every tear, a testimony. Every wilderness moment, a prophetic preparation. And now, your very existence carries an aroma that breaks yokes. That's why people tremble near you without knowing why. That's why children feel safe in your presence. That's why atmospheres calm when you enter the room. You're not dramatic, you're divine. Not because of your strength, but because of your surrender. Let the old version of you go. The one who needed to be understood. The one who stayed silent to keep others comfortable. The one who gave until they bled you dry. That you was brave, but she's not coming into this new season. That you was kind, but now kindness has evolved into discernment. That you was available to everyone, but now you've learned to guard your spirit like a sacred flame. You don't belong to the crowd. You belong to the cloud. And where the cloud moves, you move, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it means walking alone, even if it means letting go of what once held your heart, because this time you're choosing obedience over attachment, and that obedience is unlocking doors no man can shut. Divine access, divine assignments, divine relationships, not just people who say the right things, but people who carry the same oil, not just temporary support, but covenant alignment, not just passing encouragement, but spiritual synergy. God is surrounding you with warriors, not watchers, with builders, not leeches, with people who don't compete with your light because they've learned how to protect their own. You won't have to explain yourself anymore. You won't have to hide your hunger for more of God. You won't have to downplay your discernment. You'll be in places where depth is celebrated, where purity is protected, where revelation is normal. And when they see you again, the ones who left, the ones who mocked, the ones who couldn't stay, they won't recognize you. Not because your face has changed, but because your frequency has. You've elevated. You've been recalibrated in the secret place. And that glory isn't just resting on you. It's flowing through you. It's in your tone, your eyes, your presence. They'll feel the shift and know they missed something divine. But you won't gloat. You won't throw your anointing in their face, because true authority doesn't need revenge. It walks in redemption. You'll bless those who cursed you. You'll intercede for those who slandered you. You'll smile at those who turned away, not because they deserve it, but because you're free, because you've tasted heaven, because you know that nothing this world can give is worth more than what you carry in your spirit. You've passed the test, chosen one, not by being perfect, but by staying pure. And now, heaven is placing the mantle, one that fits your shoulders, one that matches your warfare, one that cannot be stolen, copied, or transferred, because it was made for you, crafted in the dark, signed in your tears, sealed by the hand of God. And with that mantle comes movement, nations, generations, atmospheres. When you speak, things will break. When you pray, things will shift. When you show up, chains will fall. Not because you're loud, but because you're light. Not because you force it, but because you are it. Let them wonder how you made it. Let them ask where your strength came from. Let them sit in silence when your name rises again. Because this time, it won't be about proving anything. It'll be about fulfilling everything. Everything God said. Everything God promised. Everything God whispered when your soul was too shattered to believe it. You are the fulfillment, chosen one. You are the prophecy in motion. You are the answered prayer in the flesh. You are the revival that religion can't explain. And you are just getting started. Chosen one, as you stand here at the edge of everything that once broke you and everything that's now birthing through you, may you feel the gentle weight of glory resting on your shoulders, not as a burden, but as a crown. The kind of crown forged in fire, dipped in tears, and sealed with the silent yes you gave God when no one was looking. You didn't chase the throne. You chased his heart, and in doing so, you became royalty in realms unseen. They'll never understand how you're still standing, after all the betrayal, the loss, the rejection. But heaven knows. Heaven watched you sow in sorrow. Heaven watched you grow in darkness. Heaven watched you say, "Not my will, but yours, Lord," even when it cost you everything. And now, heaven is watching you rise. So, lift your head, not in pride, but in knowing who you are. You are the one who wasn't picked by people. but was chosen by God, the one who wasn't protected by man, but was hidden by the Father, the one who didn't have a perfect story, but carries perfect purpose. You didn't just survive, you transcended. You didn't just endure, you evolved. And this anointing on your life, it's not a reward, it's a responsibility. You are marked now. You are sent, and the world has no idea what's coming through you. Stay yielded. Stay pure. Stay hidden in the presence that sustained you through the silence. Don't forget what he whispered to you in the wilderness, because that word is now the wind beneath your wings. And as you go forward, you will see God never removed to punish. He removed to position. He never let them leave to harm you. He let them leave to heal you. Because sometimes the pulling away is really the pulling together of everything meant for your destiny. Chosen one, walk boldly now. You're not the same. You never will be. You carry fire. You carry truth. You carry him. Amen.